Gentlelady from Maine is recognized for an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment at the desk, and I prefer to have the reading dispensed with.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentlelady is recognized for remarks on her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll all be pleased to know this is the last of my amendments. So this one would remove a rider on a pesticide labeling amendment. So just to explain this a little bit, the EPA sets the floor for how pesticides can be regulated. And then state and local governments can and should be able to inform residents of their states of potential health risks based on the latest science. Reasonable restrictions made for pesticide usage, such as limiting how close they can be sprayed to schools or playgrounds, or whether they can be sprayed in certain communities. This amendment are allowed because of this. So there's a floor. This allows communities and states to do a little bit more. This rider would preempt states from going beyond the current floor. It doesn't take chemicals away from farmers. It doesn't take away the opportunity to farm or to use these pesticides, and it doesn't change something that currently exists. This amendment does not take away pesticides. It just ensures that state and local governments can provide residents with up-to-date safety information. And it ensures that chemical companies can be held responsible for failing to provide relevant safety information. Now, if we all truly care about making sure that America is healthy, then why wouldn't we want to make sure that Americans have access to relevant health information on pesticides? And why would we want to give giant chemical companies a pass for being held liable if someone is harmed from their product? My state, Maine, is one of the 7 states that currently does have advisories and restrictions. Over 30 state and local regulations in Maine are related to pesticides and pesticides warning. That could be preempted by this language. And I just want to make sure that states like Maine, my home state, which has a whole variety, as I've said, of these kinds of restrictions. Here's a little information on the many states in the many communities in my state that have decided to provide this information, warning, or restrictions. And people would be very upset in my state if they thought they didn't have the right to go beyond the floor. Now, we've heard some talk about this already, and I'm sure we'll hear some argument about it already, that the language simply clarifies existing law that states can't require a different pesticide label. That's not true. This amendment would forbid the EPA itself from approving any label or policy that departs from an old risk assessment or cancer classification. It freezes the effect of these assessments. In the last review, it said non-cancer causing EPA is barred from adding a warning, even if there is new science or court findings or the company itself asked for it. This would ban that until a new assessment is finished. So this is just a way to make sure people have the information. This is just a way to allow that the EPA does its job to protect us from harmful chemicals. This is just a way to make sure that that information is available. I urge you to support this amendment. It removes a rider that changes what is existing practice, and I think that it's something we should be all able to agree on. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. The gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Simpson, is recognized to respond to the amendment.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Apparently, I'm going to have to explain this once again. I thought I was fairly clear with it before. Let me read to you what the FIFRA statute says. This is what it says. Uniformity. Such state shall not impose or continue in effect any requirement for labeling or packaging in addition to or different from those required under this subchapter. This is an interstate commerce thing. Now, if Maine wants to ban chemicals in its state because it thinks they're not labeled correctly, they can ban them. They can ban them today. This will not affect that. It just says that Maine shouldn't be able to do a labeling requirement, and then all the chemical companies in the world have to abide by whatever Maine decides. They're going to sell them in Idaho. It's more likely that it won't be Maine because they probably don't have that many sales in Maine compared to, say, California. When the California EPA, their state EPA, decides they want a different labeling, they think that this chemical causes cancer, they can put that on their label. well, then every state is going to have to put it on eventually, because a company is not going to have a different label for every single state. They will go to the most strict one that sells the most. That'll be California probably. And that would be the standard across the country. What we have tried to do over the years is say, the EPA does this. It is not a floor. I don't know where that idea came. It is a floor. It may cause cancer, it may not. We're not going to say it does. That's not what the EPA does. The EPA does research to see if it's causing cancer or any other problems. And they can redo it, they can revisit it, they can re-examine it as many times as they want. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that. All this does is deal with the interstate commerce part of labeling. So if a state wants to say, you know what, I don't want this sold in Idaho because we think in Idaho that it causes cancer. We can do that today. All this deals with is labeling. We think we address this in the underlying en bloc amendment. So I understand the concern and I understand the confusion out there that's being spread, frankly. I know the Maha moms have been calling and all that kind of stuff. You know, I agree with them. I think we ought to make America healthy again. I'm glad they're taking an active role in this. But they're getting so much misinformation about what this does that it's hard to find the truth out. And we're hearing a lot of it today. So I would hope my colleagues would vote against this amendment. I'll try not to talk about it again. But I hope we vote down this amendment.
I thank gentlemen. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized to address the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To be clear, I support the Pingree amendment, and I believe what you're telling me. I need some clarification. And I didn't talk to any of these groups that you've talked about, okay? So I think the bill might do more, or I need to see language that doesn't include what I'm about to read. So, and I'm reading from the language that I have about the bill, and it says, none of the funds made available by this or any other act may be used to issue or adopt any guidance or any policy, take any regulatory action, or approve any labeling or change such labeling that is inconsistent or within such a respected different from the conclusion of what's on there. So here's where I have the problem, Mr. Simpson, is any guidance. Right now, Minnesota provides guidance from our state to our farmers and to other community members about which pesticides might be harmful, which are water soluble, which could land up in their wells. So I agree with what you're saying, but what I have in front of me would says any guidance. And then when you look at the bill on page 246, some of the money that Minnesota uses it when it has its guidance, when we go out and we talk to farmers and we talk to people who are applying it, and I worked on this when I was in the State House, the pesticide program implementation is included in that money, and it says no funds. So then when I read guidance, it's like, okay, that's slightly different from what I'm hearing you say, and support some of what Ms. Ranking Member Pingree is saying. So I feel very caught in the middle on this because I don't want to take a vote that would put Minnesota in jeopardy from using any of the EPA pesticide money for doing guidance. And I don't see in the language here, there was a term, I used to hate it when people used it when we would do bills in Minnesota. I don't see any comfort language in here that would lead me to believe that I wouldn't be putting our guidance money in jeopardy. And so I just wanted to say that for the record here. Mr. Simpson, I believe everything you're telling me. I do. But reading it leads me to believe I could, by not supporting the Pingree Amendment, putting our guidance in jeopardy. And with that, I thank you both for listening to me, and I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. Gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, recognized to address the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in strong support of the Pingree Amendment to strike this insidious industry-written rider from the bill. I'll point out, and I certainly trust and have have respect for Mr. Simpson, and have worked with him on many issues, and appreciate his sincerity. But the fact is this is a rider that protects chemical company profits at the expense of our health, our communities, and even our children's lives. But let's be clear about what this does. And I'm not about to say anything different than what Mr. Simpson just described. It would prohibit states and localities from issuing their own warnings about pesticide risks, even if new scientific evidence shows those chemicals cause cancer, birth defects, or other serious harm. This rider would gag the very governments that are closest to the people and best situated to quickly protect them. Everyone here knows I'm a breast cancer survivor. I find this rider not just offensive, but dangerous. And I'm not the only cancer survivor in the room, nor do I corner the market on concern on behalf of cancer patients. But this bill, this language says that even if science evolves, even if we learn more about the cancer risks that these pesticides pose, states and communities can't put warnings on this packaging to tell you that. They can't require that. They can't even warn people, and that's unconscionable. We know how this happens. Chemical companies put profits ahead of our health, then they ask Congress to shield them from any accountability. This amendment doesn't cancel the sale of any of these chemicals. It just says that based on science, warnings have to be allowed. And that's exactly, this rider is the classic poison pill, literally. It's written by and for polluters, slipped into a funding bill that's supposed to protect our environment and public health. And let's not forget, it also strips away state and local authority. Many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, actually most of us, really spend a lot of time promoting local control, states' rights. Well, here's your test. Will you side with your community's local rights or with chemical lobbyists? States always had the ability to go above and beyond federal minimums, always, when it comes to protecting their citizens. By the way, while this language might have been in the bill over the last 3 years, it has actually never made it all the way through the process. So it is not current policy. This rider would rip away the ability for local governments, state governments to use science to best inform their constituents. I walked the hard path of a cancer diagnosis and treatment. I've seen what it does to families and felt the impacts of my own family and children, and I refuse to stand by while we let corporate lobbyists write language that muzzles states and leaves families in the dark about real risks to their health. The ranking member's amendment is about protecting people, not polluters' profits. So yes, let's rip this rider to shreds. Let's send a clear message that we will not allow corporate polluters to hide the truth about cancer-causing chemicals, and we will always fight to put public health above corporate wealth. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the ranking member's amendment. Vote yes, and stand with your constituents in local and state governments. Vote for sunlight and transparency, and vote to inform your constituents about the risk that these chemicals pose, then let them make their own decisions. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, gentlelady. The gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized to address the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise also in strong support of this amendment. I associate myself with all of my colleagues, especially Ms. Wasserman Schultz's comments. I'm also a former Philadelphia trial lawyer, so this strikes at something that I care an awful lot about, which is protecting those who are harmed, particularly by companies who know better, and they want to protect themselves instead of their customers. Quite simply, Section 453 would prevent states from acting expeditiously to protect their residents from dangerous chemicals. EPA has to do an entire study from scratch in order to change their determination of whether chemicals cause cancer, even when outside evidence is definitive. This can mean years-long delays in updating labels, meaning more people are harmed by chemicals that we already know to be dangerous, and that chemical companies are shielded from liability even when they know they are responsible. This quite simply makes no sense. One especially egregious example of this is paraquat. Paraquat is made by Syngenta, which is owned by ChemChina, a Chinese state-owned chemical conglomerate. Paraquat has known health risks. It is banned in dozens of countries, including in China. Let me give you an idea here what it is. Paraquat is a herbicide, widely used by American farmers despite being banned in over 70 countries, including China. Its dangers, independent research links chronic paraquat exposure to heightened risk of Parkinson's disease. Studies show that paraquat can damage dopamine-producing neurons essential for motor functions. Farmers who have handled paraquat in the fields are at the highest exposure for risks. Internal documents indicate Syngenta knew as early as the 1960s, we're going back to those birthdays again, that paraquat could accumulate in the brain, potentially causing Parkinson's-like symptoms, and they continued to market the product without adequate warnings, even as China and 70 countries banned the sale of it. What's going on now? There are thousands of farmers struggling with Parkinson's-like disorder who are suing for their own damages, but also for the right to let others know and that there be warnings on all of these labels when the dangers and the damage is known. So Section 453 would shield Syngenta, ChemChina from liability when paraquat causes harm. As I say, this is just one example. I don't understand how it makes any sense. Why wouldn't we want to warn? Isn't there a duty to warn? And shouldn't we allow states to do that? I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. The gentleman from California, Mr. Levin, recognized to address the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, rise in support of the Pingree Amendment. Let's be honest about what this provision does. It blocks the EPA from updating pesticide labels, even when new science shows those products may be dangerous. And it ties the hands of states like mine in California from stepping in when the federal government won't. We're not talking about burdensome new regulations. We're talking about basic transparency, telling people when a chemical they're using or spraying might cause cancer or serious harm. I know that many of you might vote to keep this section in the bill, but I'd ask you to think hard about who benefits and who pays the price, because this provision doesn't protect farmers. It protects companies from lawsuits. It gives them cover to keep selling the same product with the same outdated label long after we know it might be causing harm. And when the lawsuits come, and they will come, those same companies will stand behind Section 453 and say, well, Congress told us not to change the label. That will be your name on it. It'll be the vote of this body. It'll be your legacy that happened. And I think we all want a strong agricultural sector. I'm proud to have almost 1,000 small family farms in and around my district. We just want consistency for producers that can't come at the cost of silencing science or shielding people from accountability when they know that they are using pesticides or other sorts of harmful substances. So let's do the right thing, not the easy thing, the right thing. And I'm open to anybody telling me that what I just said is wrong on the substance, on the merits. And I hope you support the Pingree Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any other members wishing to address the amendment? If there's no further debate, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to my colleagues for all of their eloquent arguments about why this amendment should be adopted. Just once again to emphasize the point here. This removes a rider that is in this bill, that has been submitted in other bills, but has never become actual law. So we are not changing existing practice. We are not taking anything away from current farmers and their ability to do the work that we do. As my colleagues have said so eloquently, this is making sure that people have current and updated information about the health impacts of pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, a variety of things that are regulated under FIFRA. This makes sure that that information is available. If your state chooses to add that information, if your state chooses to add more restrictions, or if the EPA wants to update that, it will be allowed to do so. Farmers have other alternatives. Many of these chemicals or pesticides or herbicides are banned in other countries, and they have alternatives that they use. There is a reason we got calls from Maha moms and organic farmers, because this is one of those areas where we converge, where we say, we want to make sure our families stay healthy. We want to make sure our communities are healthy. We want to make sure the very farmers who interact with these chemicals are also healthy and know the dangers of the chemicals that they face. There is never a time in this country where there should be information that is known by a company and not is available to everyone else who may consume or use that product. So let's make sure that information stays available, that the rights are there for our farmers and our consumers, and we remove this rider and remove this harmful language. And I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. The question's now on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Maine. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. Opinion of the chair, the no have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.